Okay, great. So I will call to order the regularly scheduled city council meeting. It is May 18th of 2023 and the time is 6:15 p.m. Thank you all so much, those that are coming this evening. Our first item this evening is a roll call. Ryan, will you do roll call?
Mayor Wusso,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Dame, Councillor Schachter, Councillor Kaup, Councillor Weimer, Councillor Zelinski, Councillor Godis. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Does anyone have any agenda changes or conflicts this evening? Okay, I'll take that as a no. I'll bring it back to council for any council announcements. I see Councillor Dames lit up. Let's see what you got here. There we go.
Excellent, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I just want to let everybody know that next Wednesday at 11 o'clock, there's the kickoff for the coke oven repair and restoration process. I'll be there. And if anybody else wants to come, please join us. We're finally doing it. 11 a.m.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, yeah.
And Councillor Godis.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to be appointed to the EPA Small Advisory Committee. And I will be doing that on Monday in DC. And I also was invited to give testimony to the Natural Resources Committee for the U.S. Forest Service Enhanced Leasing Program. So I'll be doing that next week.
Awesome. Thank you for representing us at those places. Any other council comments this evening? Or council announcements, I guess it is. You know, do you want to wait for council comments versus announcements for that? Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to turn him off. Let's move on to citizens appearing before council, and this is for items that are not on the agenda. Anyone online? Doesn't look like it. Okay, we will close the public comment section. We'll return it back to council, and I'll be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Oh, get your mic on, please. Sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, a motion made by Councillor Kaup, a second made by Councillor Goes. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay. We are moving right along. We have another proclamation this evening. This evening we have a Historic Preservation Month proclamation. Bill Kite, would you like to come up? Stand. And you have some board members. Yes, Melissa. Awesome. Thank you so much. Read it to you guys. This evening, we have a proclamation for Historic Preservation Month for May of 2020. Whereas the National Trust for Historic Preservation established May as Historic Preservation Month in 1973 as a way to promote historic places for the purpose of instilling community pride and showing the social and economic benefits of historic preservation. And whereas Historic Preservation Month can instill awareness of the local historically significant buildings and landmarks to the residents of Glenwood Springs. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contribution made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped our community. And whereas the Glenwood Springs community continues to demonstrate its commitment through historic surveys, the nomination of cultural resources as local landmarks, and the protection of its natural resources, both built and natural, and the recognition, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic properties. Now, therefore, I, Ingrid Russo, Mayor of the City of Glenwood Springs, do hereby proclaim May 2023 as National Preservation Month and call upon the city of Glenwood Springs to join their fellow citizens across this country in recognizing and participating in this special observance. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, to be affixed this 18th day of May in the year 2023. Yeah, thank you both. And I'll sign this and hand it back to our clerk.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Getting better every time. Let's see here. We are moving on to actions and or presentations. And the first on our list is item 10, Planning and Zoning Commission appointments. I would be looking for a motion or discussion regarding the 4 applications we have.
Here,
Mhm.
if I may.
You may.
Thank you. I would move that we appoint alternate Commissioner Davy and alternate Commissioner Sims to the permanent position for the Planning and Zoning Commission. And that we also appoint, I forgot his name, John Houghton. Howden, that came today, that we interviewed today to the Planning Commission as an alternate.
Okay. Mhm.
Second that.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, well, then I'll call the question. You can maybe just go ahead and. Thank you.
It passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we will move on to item number 11, Historic Museum Funding Request.
Good evening, council. My name is Steve Boyd. I'm imposter city manager. Just for a little bit of background on this one, the historic museum gets money every year from the A&I fund, and that was put in when the A&I fund was passed, however many years ago. The amount's been $60,000 for a number of years now, and it's stayed at $60,000. It's been addressed a little bit a couple of times in other ballots. But to be clear, at this time, you guys have all the discretion that you want. There's no requirement. You can do whatever you would like to do. Bill Kite had approached council some time ago, a few months ago, and said that he'd like an additional $60,000 this year for various purposes, but partly in kind of some succession planning. You guys asked the Financial Advisory Board to take a look at that, which they did. They then had a few questions, about finances and tax returns and that kind of stuff. And I think those got cleared up, and the Financial Advisory Board met again, and they came out with a recommendation that says, we think that you should go ahead and fund the request. I have asked Bill to be here tonight in case you guys have any questions, but as far as I know, whatever dialogue you guys need, and then I think you just need a motion in a second and we'll be done.
So Bill and I had met probably a month ago, and we had had a conversation about the idea of, instead of just a $60,000 additional lump sum, what would help move the needle with the health, for the health of the entire organization. And, that the a nonprofit organization's health can be measured in a lot of different ways. But, one of the things we both talked about and decided is, man, we need a bigger donor base. We need the Historical Society to have some nonprofit help, some consulting, things that will help get it into a better position. And so, I had emailed Bill. I told him, I'll do this next week, and next week turned to next month. And so finally I got it to him today is like a summary of our conversation. I think the only thing that you said you didn't remember was, instead of $20,000 for a matching grant potentially, I put in there, it's good to have it in small, manageable donations. So like if one donor gets mad, if they go away or they just can't, it doesn't cripple the organization. So I sent it to a few of you. I think maybe I sent it to all of you, the kind of that conversation. And so I guess I'll just make the motion that we grant the Historical Society, let me be clear here. That we grant the Historical Society $20,000 for an organizational assessment and subsequent support from an outside nonprofit organization or consultant that would be hired by the city to work with, jointly hired by the city with approval of Bill and his board. And that another 20,000 would be used as an incentive base match, so that for the next month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, Bill can go out and say to the community, hey, we got this match, we got the city's, been generous and given us this opportunity. So every dollar you give, you can get another dollar. That will raise another, between that 20,000, the 20,000 that you'll raise, that'll be another 40,000. So it's still the 60,000. It's just in a way that is going to help increase the base of the, excuse me, strike that last sentence because I'm still in the motion. And with that $20,000, it needs to be in $1,000 or less donations. And so that's my motion. The importance of, and I'm open for questions on this, the importance of that $1,000 is, as I said before, if somebody.
Second.
Okay,
Open for discussion.
thank you.
And I'll take a question from Councilor.
Are we discussing or questions?
Discussing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can
All
ask
right.
questions because we now have a motion on the table.
I'm highly appreciative of what Commissioner Godus has done in terms of analysis and important. My inclination, however, is to honor the FAB's requests and their due diligence, and basically give the Historical Society and a potentially new director a probation period of 2 years to handle the very demands without an external party necessarily, to get their board fundraising and director in order. So I'm inclined to lean to support the FAB requirement or proposal. Thank you.
Have any other comments? And then here. I'm getting.
Oh, no, there it is. Just real quick, and I appreciate your effort because I feel, and this is maybe more for the newer members of council, what you laid out tonight in a motion is what we discussed in a workshop. That's how I feel. I think it came down to, let's help the Preservation Society, the Historical Society, and let them help themselves. So I feel like what you put forward is exactly in line what that workshop was all about.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate Councilman Godus's work on this and the proposal. I like the idea, almost think of it as the help that appears to be sort of needed in the situation. Lots of phrases, a hand up versus a handout, or whatever the phrase might be. But I appreciate that work and the thought and the approach to not just say no, or to not just say yes again, but to kind of think about this and approach it from a different sort of perspective. I would like to ask for clarification on the motion with respect to selection of the consultant. I just want to clarify, but I think you said that the council selects and then the Historical Society approves.
I think it's the intent is this is a partnership.
Yeah, okay.
And so the motion, I will clarify the motion. The motion would be that the city and the Historical Society would select a contractor jointly, and the contractor would be paid directly from the city.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilor Simmons.
So,
yeah, I was wondering about clarification as well. The $20,000 match would be addition to the 60,000, so they would actually get 80,000 or?
Sorry, just so I can stay on the record. No, so it would be 20,000 in organizational support. It'd be 20,000 as a catch match to the 20,000 that they would now be going out to raise. So
Got it.
the total amount would still be the 60,000.
Got it.
It just comes from different sources.
So then I would follow that up with, I don't know that it's to their benefit to limit the size of the donations for this because it's a call to action. It could be an ongoing, I understand the intent, but I wouldn't want them to not meet the goal because of that limitation.
So in my motion, I'll clarify the motion. So you might need to accept all these seconds.
Yeah,
If it's
just keep
okay.
going.
In my email back and forth to Bill, that, you know, it is most important. It's most useful when you have a timeline. Say, hey, for the next 30 days, this is what we're doing. I personally, so my motion will say that they have until the end of the year to raise it. I think it's most effective if Bill does it as a call to action right now, so it just doesn't draw out. The idea with $1,000 is if he gets a donation, he can get Alpine Bank probably to stroke a check for 20 grand tomorrow. That's great, but that doesn't help the organization's breath, because if Alpine Bank goes, not Alpine Bank, if a donor scratches a check, but that donor decides not to scratch it next year, or they're not a regular giver, then it doesn't really help the organization. But hypothetically 21,000 or $4,500 gifts diversifies the donor base and gets people more bought into the organization. Those people are more likely to give year after year. And if one or two of them goes away, gets mad, moves away, becomes disinterested, dies, then it's a little hit, not something it's an over reliance on one funding source. And that was
Yeah.
that part.
No.
And I'm not sold on it. And
Okay.
if he gets other people that give a $5,000 gift, great, but only 1,000 of it would apply to the match.
All right.
But if you're caught up on that,
I'm not caught up on it. I don't know that I feel like that's in the best interest of the organization. I get your intent. I just, personally, there's the time, like, for instance, last year when we sold the business, I had felt like I had more discretionary spending power, and I donated to a couple of organizations more significantly, and it was a one and done. I won't have that money again. So I wouldn't want to see them not able to work towards this or to miss that goal because of that limitation. Even though I do completely support your intent in putting that in there, I don't know that in this particular circumstance is in their best interest for long term. Since this is like a one-time kind of a ask. Maybe next year as like a definite qualification for funding, maybe that would be the time to
Sure.
put that in, when they've already got that ongoing process.
If you guys are good, I'm gonna move on to Council Cap.
I guess I would just, in listening and being drawn into that conversation, I would ask, is there a number, Aaron, where you and Jonathan's motion could find some type of compromise? So think about that. My only question was, what I remember from the work session, we talked a lot about vision of the board and them working towards having a 5-year plan, for the organization, say a 2-year and then a 5-year plan. I assume maybe that's your goal of the consultant. Jonathan, is that the intent?
Councilor Otis.
yeah,
Counselor Davis?
I should just read the email. It might say.
That might help
So
because,
I'll read the email to put it into the record.
and I'll just say for my record, I would prefer that be somehow part of the motion.
So
if
let me
possible.
read the email, and that will be the motion, if that's okay. Let's see.
You have a motion.
Oh, yeah, okay, well, let me read the email and I can make an amendment to the motion. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, here we go. So the proposal, $20,000 for an organizational assessment and subsequent support from an outside nonprofit organization / consultant. Bullet point, an organizational assessment could include a financial audit, but doesn't necessarily have to. This would be so the Historical Society board and staff can go through something like a SWOT analysis. The consultant would work with Historical Society on imparting nonprofit best practices and specific fundraising strategies over the course of a year. This tranche of funds would come from the city to the contractor and would be jointly agreed upon by the city and historical staff. One outcome I hope this process is clear. From this process is a clear and realistic 1, 3, and 5-year operational and fiscal roadmap. So I will amend that to include that expectation of a 1, 3, and 5-year fiscal and organizational roadmap. And then to my 20,000 for incentive-based donation, good for any donations under $1,000. This can be so the Historical Society can attract and broaden your donor base. It would be pretty easy just to ask 1 to 2 wealthy donors for a one-time gift to take advantage of the city's match, but that would not create the diversity of donor base needed to have a healthy funding stream. The strategy works. For the strategy to work, the time urgency attached. So my suggestion would be a self-imposed deadline. Your pitch could be the Historical Society has received a matching grant from the city, so every dollar you donate, yada, yada, or something like that. We all want the Historical Society to get funds as soon as possible, but from my perspective, if you took the rest of the year to raise 20K, which is in the motion, in order to secure 20,000 for the city, I would be fine with that. My last request, and I will add this if somebody wants, if they think it's important would be that we, city council, get a report from the consultant's organizational assessment and have periodic check-ins where the Historical Society board, staff, and consultants meet with Glenwood staff and council on the progress the organization is making based on the assessment. This would be so that we can all be on the same page, ensure that we are all well-informed partners. I don't care if that's actually in the motion or not, but
So I'm gonna have you amend that, and I'm gonna check with council. Whoops. I'm gonna-
I'm gonna try to read back, I think.
Mhm.
What you're saying
Okay, great.
is the motion by Councilor Dotis is that there is a total of 40, not $60,000 to be utilized for the Historic Preservation Society. $20,000 to be an organizational assessment with a contractor to be jointly selected by the city and the Historic Society. Is required to include a 1, 3, and 5-year fiscal roadmap. $20,000 to be used only for matching grants. The maximum matching grant to count towards the $20,000 would be $1,000
per donor.
per donor. And they have until the end of the year to fulfill that 20,000. And that at some point, there would be a report from the consultant to be paid out of the $20,000 per organizational assessment, a report to the council regarding the status and development process with the organization.
Yeah, I'm gonna catch you. Hold on one second. So you have made a motion. You're agreeing with the way that Carl represents it. Have you seconded your amendments? Can you use your mic, please? Thank you. Okay,
I will second all the amendments and changes.
okay. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to Counselor Kaup then.
My only clarification that I had was you mentioned the 1, 2, and 5-year fiscal plan. I think that should also include an organizational and kind of board plan.
Yeah, and I think the
Yep.
only requirement, I mean, there was a bunch of suggestions. That was the,
I said organizational and
Oops, hold on.
okay. one
When Carl
organizational and
just said fiscal.
So,
Yes.
okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Sounds like we have, I see Bill, would you like to come to the podium and just clarify anything that's been coming up? Mhm. Okay. Can you just say your name and if you're, yeah.
Bill Kite, the Executive Director of the Glenwood Springs Historical Society and Frontier Museum.
And do you
I
live in
do-
the city limits? Do you live in city limits?
I used to live in the city limits.
Okay, thank you.
I would be more than glad to accept the 60,000 and take whatever money it takes out of that and hire a consultant with the city's input. Then this is just way beyond, even though I agree with the things you said, I'm willing to do that, but we have an existential crisis here. And I don't know what else to say. you know, I visited with most all of you over this. Except for the new person, and we were gonna meet at the museum and talk about this. So again, I'm glad to sit down any working session and work out those kind of details later, but we need the 60,000, and I've already put some interest out, and I've received a letter of interest from one consultant already. So we're more than glad to take that out of the 60,000, whatever that takes, then confuse it with all this. And I, because it's just, even though you and I've talked and I agree with your concepts on that, I could probably get fired from the board if I come back and get something that even I don't understand. So any questions at all? Any comments?
We'll say Counselor Godus.
Yeah, I mean, since it's my motion, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, Bill.
Well, okay, you're only gonna give us 40,000. We might get the 20,000 at the end of the year if we match it. Is that what I hear?
Yeah, so I mean, you're saying the organization needs 60,000, and I think, you know, the matching part is so that you can go out and excite a donor base and you can get more people to donate. So eventually it will be 60,000, but you have a little skin in the game as well with that. The other 20,000 is just organizational health, which, because you're in a crisis, I think you need.
Because we got a philanthropic director who has already got money coming in. We've matched already the 20,000 that we said that we would originally have for this year. We've already brought that in. Okay, we're partnering up with Network for Good. We're doing everything we can at this point. We have like $30,000 last time I checked to last the rest of the year. So I would like to return to the original recommendation that FAB made to this board that I've appeared before twice. And let's just move on here, and I'll still get the things done you want done, but I honestly, at this point, am more confused than I was before, even when I wrote the answer to the letter this afternoon.
I'm going to move on to Counselor Cope.
I guess I have questions. So far this year, and this might be a question for Steve, we funded 60,000 to the Historical Society, correct? And we're in May right now. And so I understand that it was the recommendation of FAB to give the 60 for the other part of the year. But we did have what I thought was a very good conversation at a work session about organization. And I haven't heard anything come back on movement on some of the things we talked about on this. This is the first I've heard of it. So in a way, I can understand Counselor Godus's proposal here, because it is proposing that the city essentially still give 40 in support to the organization in total, but incentivizing the organization to then raise a $20,000 match. That'll get you the 60. I don't know the level of a consultant, what that might cost. So that may be a question as an extra expense that's being added with this. But what I'm understanding there is that it still does get you to the 60, but it does put some incentive to the organization to do extra fundraising. And if that fundraising is going on right now, can some of the monies coming in be part of that match, or does it have to have some date attached to it?
Counselor Godus. I just looked at you.
Looking at me
I
doesn't
mean,
kind
these
of
are
agree.
questions I think we should.
Yeah,
clarify.
I mean, so for clarity, I would say that any donation from today on, or we could even backdate it to May 1st, April 1st, even if we want, any qualifying being that $1,000. We wanted to, but again, the idea is new donors, new people, new excitement. So going back and collecting and having an account with people who've already given doesn't quite accomplish that with what I'm.
Something that happened subsequent to our work session. I mean, because that was.
Oh, so like a month ago,
correct, was given.
like April 1st?
don't know when your fundraising started, Bill.
Oops,
Hold on.
1 second. You need to get your mic on. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Those are just questions that I have, and I know it's a little different than what the FAB had recommended, but at the same time, I believe it's meeting the intent of the FAB, which is for the city to work on, extra funding for the Historical Society and show that support and work on building that community support. So, I'm also open to, if the consultant is going to cost more, maybe that's something that the city could put some extra funding in for.
Hold on 1 second, Counselor Godus.
It's so hard. I would say that that is also part of the periodic check-in part of the motion, is that when they check in and the consultant says, man, we've done all this great work, we're doing this,
Mhm.
but man, we're 3/4 of the way through the year. They could really use me for another half a year or whatever. I think that's a perfect opportunity for us to reexamine. I put $20,000 just as a marker.
Mhm.
It could be 30,000. I don't care if you want to make the motion amend it up to 30, that's fine. I think at some point, the juice may not be worth the squeeze a little bit. And at some point, the idea also is that the Historical Society goes, boy, this is, yeah, I know, even I'm not, even I'm getting bored of what I'm saying. But at some point, if it's a value to them, then they would actually take money that they are raising and continue that relationship. So that's why I put the 20,000 in there. But it could be 25, it could be 30 if you thought that was more appropriate.
We did,
Oh, hold on 1 second. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
I would make that amendment if that would be acceptable, to add an extra 10,000 to cover that consultant, because I think that's resources that the Historical Society doesn't have. It's a requirement that we're putting onto them, but I also think that it will be a very positive thing for the organization.
And to answer one of your questions, with the letter of interest that came in from Mission to Market was $20,000 is what they estimated, but so I think, you were on the mark pretty close to that, but I don't see it costing 30.
Mhm.
So Shelley, do you want to split me in the middle and meet me at 25 as an amendment and then have a check-in and we can just reevaluate in 6 months?
Sure.
Okay. Marco?
I'm going to jump in here really quickly and say that my concern is what happens if they're unsuccessful, meaning that we give them 20,000 for a consultant and we say we'll give them 20,000 as long as they match it. What if they get $2,000? So then all of a sudden they have $4,000. Hold on 1 second. So with that in mind, I'm curious if, and I know there's a motion on the table, but I would be more in line with supporting it if it was a combination with the financial means more similar to the FAB recommendation, what they've established as need, and still maybe do some incentivize. I love the idea of incentivizing and matching. I think it's collaborative. But I would like to see maybe here you go, 20,000 straight up. You asked for that. 20,000 match, 20,000 for a consultant. I'll put that out there and I'll go to Counselor Zelinski.
You actually just echoed exactly what I was hoping for, is I would like to see if the city feels that they can spare the extra 60,000, I think that they should get it. And if you can raise extra, then you might actually come above and beyond that and be an extra 60,000 that I was like, or extra 20,000. And I think that would be tremendous, because we're giving you the boat and we're teaching you to fish or incentivizing you to fish. And I think those are both going to be valuable to the long-term success of the organization. But I would hate to see you hamstrung before you can even start because you don't have the means to do so financially. And I feel like it's unfortunate that you're in a critical state, but you're in crisis is what I hear you're saying. And so we have to treat it as like, maybe we don't have the luxury to kind of give you a carrot today, is what I'm understanding.
thank you. Let me recap, see if I got this. 20 grand. Thank you for being a Historical Society. 20 grand for consultant. And 20 grand in matching if they achieve the 20. Is that what we're doing? Is that what that what we're doing? But that was the idea.
Let's just say that's what I threw out, and it was a meet at the middle between Counselor Shachter
Correct.
and Counselor Gotis. That's what I threw out. We still have quite a few counselors who'd like to
Right,
add
but
their 2 cents.
I have to say I like it.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Counselor Shachter, go ahead. You hit it twice, but that's okay. You should.
Oh, thank you. Again, I was not present at the workshop. I wasn't on council then. Again, my reservations are threefold. One is I look at this, when there's a motion that's so complicated that it's difficult for everybody to clearly understand or amend, I'm a little leery, even though the intent and the analysis has been good. The second one, we have an FAB for a good reason. They bring depth and expertise to us that we may not necessarily have and save time. And as I look at this, if we follow the FAB proposal, the motion may or may not lead to 60 grand. We don't know about that. And we don't know in the following year what will happen. When I look at the FAB proposal, we're saying, look, really, the FAB is saying, put the historical society, yes, give them 60 and 60. They're going through a huge transition, supposedly. We're basically giving them an 18-month leash. And that's it. It's going to come back after the next fiscal year. And I don't know that I have total faith in mandating a consultant. I would let the director and the board decide whether there's value added there, whether they can do it, and a new board. So those are my reasons for still going back to the FAB is maybe the cleanest solution and one that gives us the imperative that a year from now, next year, when we're looking at the 2025 budget, it's kind of an all or nothing thing. So those are my reactions. Thank you.
Okay. I am going to go to Counselor Weimer.
And mine is just a question, I guess, of clarification. The money that we're talking about now, however it's being, is this on top of 60 grand?
Yes.
Yeah.
That we've already given them in 2023?
Yep.
Okay,
So their request in total was 120,000.
For this
60 of they've already received and 60 they're requesting tonight. We're discussing the 60 request. We have a FAB recommendation to give it to them.
Right.
And now we're discussing the nuances of, do we give
Ah.
them the full amount? Do we give them some derivative? Do we require a match?
Right.
Okay, Counselor Den.
Counselor Gotis, how would you feel if we added that 20,000 to your motion? We keep everything standing, 20 for a consultant, 20 for matching grant, but give them 20 cash injection right now. Brings us up to 60, which is what they asked for, which is what the FAB said ultimately, but 20 is on the hook for them if they put in the work, so.
Your eyes are kind of hazy, but you still can't turn my mic. Yeah, I think, I mean, if that gets a successful motion, I think I will amend the motion to reflect that, which would go back a little bit on Shelley's amendment of the 25, whatever. So,
Okay.
Right,
so we'll just keep it clean, 2020.
Yep.
Yep.
And then all the other terms and conditions stay. apply. Okay.
Okay, so I have an amended first and amended second.
Yep.
We'll call the question.
Is everybody clear voting?
Well, I could ask, is everyone clear?
Not clear on the donation limit?
Okay.
Okay,
so
great.
So let me
Thank you.
recap.
So we're gonna hold off on the vote for just a minute.
they'll understand.
Okay, so total of $60,000 to be distributed as follows. $20,000 for an organizational assessment with the city and the Historic Society to jointly select that consultant. That the only absolute in that is a 1, 3, and 5-year organizational and fiscal roadmap. 20,000 for matching grants with a backdated date to April 1st of this year, 2023, with a maximum match of $1,000 per donor. They have until the end of the year to raise that match to get the full 20,000. And 20,000 just in a straight, here's $20,000 for the organization.
That's my understanding. Is everyone clear?
This is,
Oh, wait, hold on one second. Counselor Schechter.
this is for the remainder of the 2023 year,
Exactly.
with nothing beyond that at this point.
Nope. It would be a new, fresh year. Counselor Gotis. Oh. Did you have yours on? Oh, Counselor Zelinski.
I'm wondering if it would be amendable to up the minimum or the maximum to 2,000, which cuts in half the potential. I just would hate to see them be denied access to larger donations.
Counselor Gotis, do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I think that's something I'd be would have been willing to do, but the extra 20,000, I think takes care of that. I mean, I think that the motion being clean now, I think what my hope is that it just speaks to the whole health. So I think the 20,000 of quick sugar in addition to the 60,000 of general operating, I feel it speaks to that. So I think if we can call the question, just keep it clean.
Does that answer your question, Counselor Zelinski?
It does. I
Okay.
just, was trying
Okay.
to see if I could do a little more.
Okay, so I am gonna call the question, but big picture before, we vote on it. This would be an opportunity for you to infuse your organization with $80,000, 60,000 in this derivative from us, and then 20,000 in matches. So,
got it now.
okay, great. Okay, awesome. Let's call the question.
Yes, Counselor Zelinski. Yes, Mayor Wusso. Yes, Counselor Gotis. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Dame. Yes, Counselor Weimer. Yes, Counselor Kaup. No, Counselor Schechter. It passes 6-1.
Thank you all
Yep.
so much. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you for fulfilling comprehensive plan 9.2B, support and increase funding for the Historical Society and Museum. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. The next item we have is item number 12, short-term rental cycles. Looks like Counselor Dame is ready to jump in.
Yes, I just have a quick question to council. Am I going to be having to recuse myself? Is this something I'm too close to or?
I don't believe so. Just for the public's benefit, Counselor Dame and his wife do operate a management company that includes short-term rentals. This particular regulation we're talking about applies uniformly to everybody. There is no financial change with regard to it or impact. And so I view it much as I would a water rate change that impacts everybody. So I don't see any reason for you not to sit on the
Okay.
matter.
Thank you.
We'll have Hannah Klausman jump in.
Good evening, council, and thank you, Marco, for that. Hannah Klausman, Community Development Director. Back to see about some direction and maybe just a quick update for the new counselors on short-term rentals. So we have two topics for you tonight. One is our short-term rental cycles and also our short-term rental categories. This is actually something that we received council direction from a while ago to bring up. And so this is just going to be a discussion. I'll update you a little bit on where we're at. I also have Emery Ellingson, our planner, who runs the program mostly from the Community Development Department for any of the harder questions. I'm going to throw those back to him. So council requested that we review our cycles and our categories. For those of you that do know, we have short-term rental permits that last for 2 years. It's a set 2 years, so all of those permits expire at the end of odd numbered years. So in 2023, they will all expire. At that time, anyone who has a permit renews their permit, and anyone new within that cycle applying at any time during that 2 years is a set price of $500 for a new permit. For short-term rental permit, we do not prorate that amount. And so that has been a comment that has come up, not so much with our department. We don't hear too much about it, but perhaps you have had comments from the community that might wish that to change. That is tied to our business license and sales tax process with finance. They also have a 2-year that's not prorated. Theirs is obviously not quite as expensive as the short-term rental permit, but our fees for that $500 initial permit as well as $300 renewal is tied to the amount of staff time that we put in to the program. And also we do this all in-house. We haven't contracted out with a third-party company because we don't quite have the number of permits that we have felt that we need to do so. That's probably a good problem not to have. So that's a little bit on permit cycles, and I'll take questions on this if you guys need more clarification. Those are also subject to a 250-foot buffer distance between vacation rentals. And when we put that component in place, we knew that grandfathered properties that eventually would sell would then start to diffuse out some of the permits that we had that were very focused in one location in town, and that has happened. And then we also have a citywide cap. I've included those numbers in your staff report, and we are not anywhere close to that cap. We have a cap that's for everything outside of the GID and then everything inside the GID, 2 different numbers. And we have plenty of room there to allow for more permits. One of the reasons why we see that not skyrocketing is that 250-foot buffer. So that keeps it distance out in some of our more popular areas like the downtown. So that's on our permits cycles. The second one is categories. We've had some discussion, and I included 2 municipal examples, attachments to the staff report, Avon and Fort Collins, that have an additional category aimed at permanent residents, homeowners that maybe are going away on a lovely sabbatical for 3 months and want to rent out their house during that time. And some municipalities organize a category specifically around that that's a little bit more flexible. What I will say is people who want to do that currently are more than welcome to within the parameters of our program. So they would be subject to the 250-foot buffer. So there might be some houses that aren't actually available to grab a permit. And then also the cap, which I already said we are not getting close to. And then they would also be subject to our current permit amounts, which are $500 for new and $300 for renewal. So we have had some discussion around that, and that was actually a topic we reviewed when we did the big code change back in 2019 with the public, and it just wasn't picked up and seen as immediately necessary to include as a category. So that's kind of the basis for that. And you can look at the town of Avon and Fort Collins. They have categories that have maximum number of nights per year. Avon is 42 nights per year for a limited permit. The town of Fort Collins requires that if you have this primary home permit that you reside there for at least 9 months out of the year. So those are the 2 things for discussion. I will mention that staff is not recommending any changes. We are happy with our program. It's functioning, and we don't hear too much pushback, but you guys might hear something different. So we're opening that up for discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions and Emery for backup as well.
Thank you. First of all, I commend your staff because we become a model for many other communities. We're wrestling with too many short-term rentals, and they've come to us. But one question, and refresh my memory and the rest of us, in the GID, is that 250 minimum in the GID, or is it just the cap in that area?
It's just the cap. You're correct. You know it well, Sumner. Sat through all those meetings.
I forgot.
So within the GID, the 250-foot buffer does not apply. So that's a tight boundary kind of in our downtown core. There's still a cap there, but not the distance buffer. And you can see if any of you are not familiar with our map, if you've never used this tool before, I know Ingrid has, I know Marco has. I get the phone calls, so does Emery. We have a interactive vacation rental map that you can access at any time from our website, cogs.us/vacation rentals. On that map, it's going to show you all those buffers. So you can go on there every day if you want. We don't update it every day, but it shows you exactly where all of our permits are. It attaches that green buffer. So in the downtown core, you see no green. And so people can go on and see if their property is located entirely within one of those buffers, which means they would not be able to apply for a permit, or just outside of one, which means they would be able to apply for a permit.
So related, if I may, particularly since that GID is so much of Ward 3 and it's so historic, would it be worthy for P and Z and housing to consider a buffer that would retroactively then go into place as houses sell, just to limit, even though we're way low, to limit impingement in a neighborhood. That'd be one question, and maybe it's rhetorical at this point.
Can you
Should-
state that just once again? I was pulling up. the
Would it
website.
would it be reasonable to reconsider through the housing or P and Z a buffer in the GID? Even though we have way lower, but that's our historic district, to make sure that there's no conditions in the future that might create significant density, even though we're way below the number. Buffers seem to be pretty common. And secondly, since there seems to be a sentiment
That's a question.
to limit to some extent, not just here, but everywhere else, short-term rental growth. And even though we can't control the market, to do what we can perhaps to disincentivize absentee owners, would it be worthy, since we are so far below the caps, both town-wise and in each district, would it be worthy to then lower them, since there's so much buffer already, lower them even further, since the demand, the difference between demand and potential supply is so great that we further suppress the incentive for that type of property? Those are questions for consideration, maybe in housing and P and Z. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Dame.
Quick question. If, let's say we're inclined to do a limited permit, which you said Fort Collins and Avon,
Mhm.
did you find any of the other ones, or was that the ones that
Oh, I'm sure there are more. out
there are
there.
more? Okay.
If I may, Counselor Jam, I know that in a number of the jurisdictions that I work in, Avon being one of them, that I was part of the regulation drafting there, the limited permit most often came up in the context of trying to make long-term housing more affordable to people, in particular teachers was the focus of it, that they might be gone over the summer.
Right.
And so I think each one of those, I think you find it in communities that have more of a limited stock. I'm seeing it more in the mountains that it's discussed, not necessarily adopted, but at least discussed.
Okay.
Crested Butte has a similar permit and parameters to what Avon does.
Right. But I mean, since we're running the other program successfully, could you imagine adding that to your plate?
Yeah, that's my question.
And I mentioned in the staff report, the components that Fort Collins and Avon has, I have questions on how they're actually enforcing it. Because it would take a lot from.
Because of
staff.
the time duration and all that?
Yes. Checking compliance to see that someone is living in their house for 9 months. I haven't thought that all the way through. It was an initial idea that we did think through back in 2019, and I wasn't real keen on it then.
Right.
And I gotta say, it hasn't changed much.
Okay.
And also Avon's 42 nights, again, that's a lot of enforcement and compliance to double check that it is functioning. And so we haven't had to use a third party. And this is something I probably could have asked, and maybe Carl knows. A lot of places do pay for that third party enforcement and compliance. And we've held several meetings with these companies. They're constantly contacting us and wanting us to use their services, but we haven't needed to. If you start adding those components, it's likely that we would.
That you would, and that's obviously a cost to the community development department. Okay. So enforcement is the issue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Kaup.
My questions, Hannah, have more to do with that buffer.
Let me bring it
Because-
back up.
Don't
It's
bring it
beautiful.
back.
Don't bring it back up. You don't want me to?
Okay,
Just so everyone at
I'm-
home knows what we're talking about.
I'm looking at the map and maybe refresh my memory, but I know we had a lot of discussion when it went in about the buffer, whether it would apply if it touched a neighboring property, but as I read through the packet, I understand that in order to be excluded a neighboring property, it has to be 100% within the buffer? Is that how
Yes.
it's being?
So it was written that your property, so if you go on here as a property owner, and I'm just choosing this area, you see that there's several buffers that intersect each other, but there's this
Right.
section that's not in the green. If any part of your property is not covered by that green buffer, you can apply.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's much more lenient than I
Mhm.
guess I envisioned that it would be initially.
And
I
maybe
had
the
always-
downtown area is not the best to look at there. It has actually functioned fairly well.
Has it,
Mhm.
it's spreading things out because the intent was that we don't, the downtown area is the area that's most heavily impacted.
And I wish I would have included a map that we have from our original. It is much more dense. So
Mhm.
this is,
Okay,
you know, what you're looking at, it looks like a lot of green.
right, right.
But those are fairly spaced out from what it was previously.
Okay.
And that's when a property sells, because the permit does not transfer, those go away. So we've had, I'm gonna throw out 10 sales in the downtown that have definitely shifted and then prohibited new properties from being there.
Okay, so staff's impression is that it's working the way it was intended to. Okay, that's.
And I
great
think
to
that's
hear.
reflected in our permit numbers. They have started to go back up.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
not in any hugely significant way.
Not concentrated in a specific area or block, which is what our intent is, I believe. So, okay, and I appreciate the input from staff too, that I don't really understand the benefit versus the cost to trying to enforce a shorter term
It
rental.
is exactly as
Mhm.
Carl mentioned, and these were the topics that we struggled with in this. We want to be supportive of people who can, you know, help their own income to stay in our community by renting out their own home and making that as flexible as possible. That's the benefit, right? The
Right.
con is unfortunately that how you do that is enforcement intensive.
Yes,
I think Glenwood Springs is in a good place because, you know, our permits are not astronomical comparatively to other jurisdictions. And, you know, there still are opportunities. So not everyone is going to get a short-term rental permit. But that is what we as the community and city council decided at the time. So I think
Okay.
that's still valid.
and do you feel that the fees that we're charging are high enough? Because they don't adjust with time, right? They don't.
They have
adjust over
not
time.
adjusted since we raised them. No,
Okay, so at some point, we may need to revisit that.
it's possible. We review our other fees and license permits, so
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Steve wanted to add something.
Okay, Steve, yeah, you're the money guy, please do.
Carl wanted me to weigh in on the fees.
Okay,
They should go up.
okay, because that's something that I'm amenable to. I have had, well, we're just asking questions, so I
Yeah.
won't pontificate. Thank you.
certainly something that we could review. And if I was, you know, if I took a minute to think about it, obviously staff costs have gone up
Mhm.
for the city.
Yep. Right.
So
Yep.
I suppose if you did it on an hourly rate basis, you could make a strong argument that those should also have gone up some.
Mhm. Counselor Gotis.
If we were inclined to create this third category, which if we do raise the rates on the other category might be more of an incentive to contemplate that. But if we do that, you gave us two distinct options of 40, hypothetically 42, 45, whatever, like a minimum number of nights versus months. What would be your preference if we wanted to do something like this?
I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I'd have to think about it. Yeah, it's going to be enforcement heavy, and I don't know if Emery has had a chance to think about that, if Emery has a present opinion on that one, since a lot of the work is going to fall to the planners doing it. I need to get back to you.
And Carl, in other jurisdictions that you work with that do this, what kind of uptake do you have any idea what kind of uptake that there's been?
You know, I don't off the top of my head. I think that in both instances, it's relatively new in the community. And so we just haven't seen what that really plays out as. I do agree that I don't know in either Avon or Crested Butte that we really have a good enforcement mechanism. And, you know, part of that is because of the way the tax is collected. If it weren't going through a VRBO or Airbnb and we just get an aggregate check because we don't see an individualized return, it's very difficult for us. Normally, I would say it's just, oh, we just look at the tax return. How many nights do you list on your tax return? We don't have that. And so, I believe Avon, you have to provide that information, sort of a rental report at the end of the year when you renew your license, I believe is how we decided to try to deal with that. But even that, I mean, is that real or not? Who knows? But it's one approach to just make it a sort of a self-reporting action. But I couldn't tell you on the uptake really.
Thanks.
Counselor Weimer.
Hannah, quick question, I think. So we have short-term rentals where the entire home is rented. We have accessory tourist rentals where it's just a bedroom. Is it safe to assume that short-term rentals also cover ADUs?
No.
How are ADUs?
So
covered?
accessory dwelling units are prohibited from being any type of vacation rental.
That's why I ask these questions.
Good question.
Thank
It's an
you.
excellent question.
Yeah. Counselor Dim.
Just follow up quick. Do we have any idea how much a third party enforcement would cost?
I'd actually included that in your staff report.
Well, just for everybody to hear.
To humor you,
He knew that.
previous estimates were between 20 and 40,000, and that depends on how many permits you have and what type of enforcement you need. So the more regulations, that's where that range is. And admittedly, that was from a couple years ago. So
Okay.
I'm guessing
Mhm.
add on at least 10.
Okay, and this is definitely something you wouldn't want to do in-house.
I just don't know. We don't have the current capacity to
Right.
do it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Zelinski.
So the way I understand when you were saying like this new category to be subject to the same parameters. So in theory, this third category could take a regular short-term rental off, like out of the option. So if like they're in that buffer and I'm just trying to
So
understand the
it
permitting
would depend
process.
on how this was crafted. What I was mentioning is currently a homeowner does have the capacity to do exactly what this category
Right.
does, except when it's encompassed by a buffer. And Avon also they have permit caps. And so this special category is usually not subject to those restrictions to make it easier. So then if we, in theory, we would obviously craft this and do a little bit more research than I have done, but craft it so that a limited permit would not be subject to it by your determination, either the cap or the buffer.
Okay, that's what I
But
was
it's more
wondering.
flexible because homeowners can do it now, but it is restrictive for them because of these other things. So if we're truly aimed at trying to make it more affordable and flexible for those types of residents and owners, then those would be some of the things that we'd look at relaxing for that category.
So then compliance and enforcement would become much more critical because you could have people really doing it and run at it.
Hold on one second. Counselor Gotis.
I don't have any more questions.
Mhm.
Are we on comments?
I think we can probably transition to comments unless anybody has any additional questions. I don't know that we need to take public comment on this, do we?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's up to you on the public comment. This is
Okay.
really informational and getting direction if we need to draft something and
Okay.
come back. So
Okay.
your call.
And really, I don't see, is there anyone in the public? I don't think that there's anyone present unless, or online. So, then I'm going to go ahead and go back to Counselor Gotis for comments. and
Yeah,
we
so
can start that.
we talked about this in 2019 when we put that moratorium on short-term rentals and to Sumner's point, we are a model. I mean, I go to CAS meetings and man, sometimes half the agenda is like, wow, what are we gonna do with these 2,500? Breckenridge specifically just took action to reduce theirs from 2,500 to 2,000. 90% of Winter Park is second homeowners and vacation rentals. Only 10% of the units are occupied by permanent residents. So good on us, by the way, I just want to say.
Thank you, Hannah
And team.
and team.
So, I think we just put so much, we're pretty, I think, visionary at the time, and there's just so much. This is one of those things that just kind of fell by the wayside because we're talking about like 100 different things and let's just not take this one on. It was always the intent to come back and revisit. Does it make sense? Much like everything else. I think everything else is kind of working. But I do hear from my neighbors, Mike and Sharon Sussman,
Mhm.
who go away for 3 months. They're retired on a fixed income. They go away for 3 months. And I don't know that they would do it, but they've asked me how it would felt if they did it. And I'm going away for 3 weeks in the summer. I don't think my wife would ever let me do this, but to be able to, I have the ability, actually, my house is not in the green. I can do a short-term rental and do that with the intent of only renting it 3 weeks a year. The downside for me, if I did that, would be, well, the downside for the tourism industry is that precludes people who might do a real one year-round, professionally managed. That forecloses on their opportunity to do it. So it's not fair to that category of people. I think obviously teachers, I think it does fit a lot of people. And if somebody's looking at their mortgage going, I don't know how to make this, but for $8,000 in 3 weeks, potentially, now all of a sudden that mortgage is doable. This will only benefit Glenwood Springs residents. I would say I am completely up to, I don't want to throw emotion out there. I'd like to hear from Shelley, and maybe I can throw emotion out there. But I'm ambivalent. It sounds like we can, suggest staff come back to us with a hard recommendation on like 45 days versus 3 months. But to me, like half a summer, maybe to a full summer, it's not just about the teacher. It's not just about the retiree. It is somebody that needs to go to Iowa to take care of their ailing father for 6 weeks and knows that it's coming up and just has to take it. So I think this is such a pro resident contemplation right now. And as far as enforcement, I would say, most people, you're giving me the rock eyebrow raise right there. I would say that most people are honest, and I know enforcement's tough. Before we get down the road of spending $20,000 to $40,000 potentially, if we have only 10 people, I don't think this is going to be a ton of people, but if we have 10 people that are taking advantage of this and 2 or 3 are doing 55 instead of 45 days, I'm not going to get super stressed out about it. Number one. Number two, neighbors love to narc on other neighbors. Like they love it. And I bet you guys get a lot of complaints from neighbors. So there's going to be a little bit of a self-policing in this. There's going to be people showing up saying they rent that for 6 months, and I can tell you, and I have photos and I have a ring cam. So I think some of it's going to, the really bad actors would be taken care of. And if somebody screws up and goes 5 days longer than they should, I don't know that we need to be spending 40 grand to worry about something that maybe 10 people are going to take advantage of. I would also say that if we did this and it turns out to be more like the first 10 go right away, and then you have a list of people, then I think it should come back to us, because then we do need to make a decision of, okay, this is really popular, so good. People are going to be using it in the summer, so it's going to provide more inventory for the summer tourism. And I would say we should have it exempt from that 250 feet. If there's somebody 2 doors down from me and somebody across the street, but it's only for a limited amount of time, I'm not worried. We didn't want it summer when we're, I'm saying you, because you mentioned the caps and all that. So I'm sorry, I'm not trying to single you out, but to answer your, well, I'm trying to answer your question. I'm sorry. I'm trying to acknowledge your question, the concern. That 250-foot radius, I think, works really, really well. But the reason that was put in is because we didn't want people to feel like they were living in a hotel on their street. And so if a couple people in your neighborhood do it for a very limited time, does that give away the Glenwood character? Does that make you feel like you're living in a hotel where somebody's to the left of you, the right of you, across the street? I don't know. So those are my comments, and that's why I'm supportive of something like this moving forward on a trial basis.
Okay. Counselor Kaup.
Okay, that was a lot. Absorbing a little bit, but no, good comments. And I guess what I want to do is maybe add a little bit of a different perspective, because we have people, and maybe Counselor Schachter knows also, I know people in our immediate neighborhood, and it's more the snowbirds. It's more the people who head south for the winter. And so they might be gone 3 or 4 months. And I don't know of any of them that rent out. Some of them might hire a house sitter, as someone to come in and live. That's a little bit different than renting it out. So where I could see possibly a benefit would be for SKICO employees to be able to have those, make use of those rentals in that place, whether or not would really take advantage of it or not. That I think I would only be supportive if we could do it in a way that was most non-invasive. And to me, the biggest part of it is how do you keep a handle on that these are still permanent resident homes that are just going away for the summer or the winter versus someone who's kind of giving that appearance, using it as a mailing address, but really has a short-term rental. So to me, that's where the kind of rubber hits the road of, and how do you regulate that? I don't know. So I'm mixed on whether or not to go this route, or whether or not it's something that you don't so much try to regulate, but you let the snowbirds kind of deal with it on a house by house basis. So that's a question that I haven't answered in my brain, but I appreciate the input from staff that the regulation is huge. And I don't know that kind of policing is something that I want our city staff, planning staff to have to deal with on a regular basis. And I'm not real excited about contracting that out either. So I like our short-term rental regulations. I think we're achieving what we want to achieve, which is to keep our town, our city, a place where people can actually live and work. And so to that extent, we're keeping from being overrun. I do think the fees should go up. So that's what would be my request out of this, is to ask staff to come back maybe in the 2024 budget, and let's look at raising those fees and building in maybe some kind of structure to where they're raised on every other year or something like that. I get comments from people I know that have short-term rentals. They don't think our fees are unreasonable. They think it's working well. So I'm pretty pleased with what we have in place right now.
I will just make a quick comment to that. So for timing purposes, all of our permits expire at the end of this year. So we'll be having that renewal. And then the next opportunity for that renewal and payment would be at the end of 2025. So just thinking, if you are interested in talking about raising those rates, perhaps now is the appropriate time before that renewal comes.
If we have time to get it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
Good
Okay.
consideration.
Great. Counselor Zelinski.
So can I ask a question still?
Absolutely.
So, because I'm new, because something Shelley said just made me bring us up a question. She said something about SKICO employees, and then Jonathan said, his neighbor leaves for 3 months. If I were to rent out my home to an employee, a short-term employee for 3 months, is that a short-term rental? So,
Absolutely not.
yeah, so I don't know why, I mean, honestly, the snowbirds and the things that we're talking about, like, I feel like that's not even a consideration. We're not
So
currently limiting those residents. from doing
Anything
that.
over 30 days
30
is
days,
not
3 months.
regulated under our vacation rental permit.
Yeah.
So that then tips into long-term rental, which we obviously greatly encourage.
Yeah, so, yeah, that changes it for me
Okay.
quite a lot.
Counselor Godis. 1 second. Okay, go
I
ahead.
guess I will make a motion then, just to focus it because, I'm sorry,
If you can give me 1 second.
Yeah.
If you can give me 1 second to make just my own comment, and then we'll jump into a motion, okay? I'm coming from the perspective of being a realtor, and I go to that map so frequently. I have clients still. and I can actually tell you when it's down for a couple days because I'm on it that often. My concern is that there is a balance within the short-term rental community and also the lodging motel hotel community. If we add inventory, what does that do to, one, the current short-term rentals, but two, in particular to the lodging community, which I really honor and appreciate the vitality that they bring and consistently bring. There's, that is what they're zoned for. That doesn't change historically. That doesn't, end when a property is sold. I think to honor them, I would not allow this. But there's other reasons that I have apprehension. The other reasons are the challenges to you guys. The fact that you would need to still publicly notice Like, how do you work that in? It's a public notice. It's all of a sudden your neighbor is doing this. There's so many other nuances to having a short-term rental adjacent to you. There's quite a bit of, well, there's strangers staying next door to your house. Sometimes they're loud. People are on vacation. I happen to be adjacent to one. I believe that it's like a healthy inventory of housing. You need a certain amount. And I think we've already dug deep with recommendations from our boards and commissions on what percentage that should be. And I think that where we are right now seems to be working. I don't think that to add in this component, which when it was initially suggested, it was intriguing because I could see myself, taking advantage of this. But then I realized enforceability becomes so challenging. It's already difficult enough to enforce the current ones that we have. Add in there people who turn 45 days into 65 over the course of the year, and then the complaints that come from it. While I like the idea, and if there's a way that you guys can say this is doable, I would be receptive to hearing some derivative. Right now, because of those reasons, I would not be supportive. And now you can make your motion. Sorry about that. Yeah, Counselor Godus.
Well, I think I can count to 4. I was gonna say I was gonna make a motion, but I'm at least interested enough in it, and if there was the support to say, if we were to go ahead and do it, and if we wanted to do something
Mhm.
like this, we don't really have a recommendation from staff. We have do you want to do this? Here's what some other people have done. So I guess my motion will be to direct staff to come up with what it would look like if we want to do it, what enforcement would look like, what do we do in nights versus a 3-month period? Is 3 months too long? Is 42 days too short? But I would love to to have you spend a little bit of time to bring us back something that you think would be beneficial in this category. And that's my motion. Not taking action on it, just a motion to get more information.
Counselor Kaup.
Is there a second?
I would say.
Okay, go ahead and turn on your mic. Mhm. Yeah, we didn't hear you. Counselor Dame.
I would second that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Let's call the question.
No, Counselor Zelinski. No, Mayor Wusso. Yes, Counselor Godus. Yes, Counselor Dem. Yes, Counselor Weimer. No, Counselor Kaup. No, Counselor Schachter. It fails 4-3.
I believe what I will leave you with, Jonathan, is that our staff stays up to date on vacation rental policy that is happening not only in this state, but across the country. We do keep our ear out for interesting and beneficial things that are coming up. So if we do find that's something that strikes us and is hitting that perfect balance, we will bring the idea back to you.
Okay.
And thank you. for your
And one thing,
consideration.
before you walk away, it does look like Counselor Kaup wants to address.
And I do appreciate that. Can I make another motion? I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to come back with an appropriate fee increase as soon as we possibly can,
Counselor.
and to get that into place before this next season of renewal.
Looks like Counselor Zelinski.
I second.
Great. We have a first and a second, or a motion and a second. Counselor Schachter.
No, I was just gonna second.
Oh, you're going to second it. Any discussion then? We'll see Counselor Godus.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with having that conversation. I think doing it so for me, I'll probably go out and get a short-term permit while the fees are reasonable, because if I want to rent my house out for 3 weeks and take everything else, I'll probably do that. And so I think raising fees on people who want a short-term rental, their own primary resident. And so maybe that's the distinction, is people who use this as a business, it's not their primary residence. I would love to have that conversation about raising those fees. People who live on the Front Range. I'm sorry.
Well, just, I'm talking about the fees that we charge right now on license.
Right, and I'm saying is creating it to that, you can amend the motion or not, but I think, you know, when we come for the discussion, my comment would be for people that use it as not their primary resident. Yes, for people that this is their primary residence and they just want to rent it out for any determinate amount of time, raising the fees on those people are hurting our residents. And I don't know that that's helpful.
Okay, it's we do have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion or should we call the question? Okay, great. We'll go ahead and call the question, Ryan.
It passes 7-0.
Thank you all. Thank you, Hannah. We
Get right on
appreciate- Yeah. Okay, we are going to move on to item 13, council comments. You know, Counselor Dem gave a suggestion earlier this evening that we just start at one end and go on down. Yeah, that's under correspondence. So, yeah, it's coming up. Yeah. So if we want to start with Counselor Schachter, do you have any comments?
I don't.
Okay. Counselor Kaup?
I do, I actually have questions more than comments, but one quick comment is that we had Arts and Culture Board this last week, and they are working on, they really have a vision to have a mural festival in town, but they couldn't really pull it together for 2023. So for 2023, they're looking at painting a bunch of the electrical boxes around town. And so they've been working with the electrical department. So that's kind of exciting. So if you hear things about that, they'll be looking for some funding, but they're also going to do fundraising for that. So, but my other questions are, I'm wondering about the South Bridge. We haven't really had an update, and I did see it in the work session plan, and I'm just wondering who, since we've had a changeover of city engineer, are we going along with the right-of-way acquisition? Are we still on schedule? Because I'd hate to see that project. get
Yeah,
to
no,
any
we
minute.
continue to be, I think, on schedule with that. I think, Steve, the new city engineer has kind of taken the lead on that, I think.
Yeah, we're bringing him up to speed. There's a lot of history. So, but we
Right.
do have that on our list to come back to you guys and give you an update and tell you where we are. And we probably need a little direction on a couple of things from you.
Okay,
Yeah.
just hoping that.
Yeah,
was-
so we're,
that will stay
yeah,
on
the
schedule.
contract's in place. My office continuing to work with the consultants, identifying next steps.
Right.
As far as acquisitions go, and then scheduling some meetings probably in early June with a couple of the landowners, as we try to finalize details.
Okay.
And avoid, unnecessary legal action.
Okay, that would be great. And then the other question was if we could get an update on the Mitchell Cooper water.
Yeah,
situation
I
at some point.
yeah, I was gonna say, I probably will have an exec session scheduled for you on the first meeting in June.
Okay,
We've been working through a number of issues there. Have a meeting scheduled with opposing counsel next week.
perfect.
So continue to work on that issue, but I think we're gonna be at a point to get some additional guidance from you guys in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Weimer?
Mine is quick. It was part of the consent agenda, but I want to just make mention and congratulate Kevin Kennedy, who we appointed tonight to the Tourism Management Board. So
Excellent.
congratulations, Kevin.
Thank you for your willingness to serve. Counselor Dem, do you have anything? Whoops.
Is it?
Yeah, so I don't know how to start this, but I probably need a little help from Han and Carl. A couple months ago, we sat here and we talked about inclusionary housing percentages. We talked about for sale units, we talked about for rent units. We also talked about incentivizing possible for sale units, having discussions, whatever, and I'm curious at this point, where do we stand? And what can we do to even further invite affordable housing compared to free market units?
Yeah, I think there's probably a number of options that we could take a look at, from incentivizing, for sale, units. We now have a revenue stream, which is absolutely has been, in my experience in other areas, a critical factor in being able to drive for sale units forward on an affordable basis and get people restricted, getting that housing restricted so that it creates a secondary market of deed restricted housing. I think we could also take a look at some differentiation in the code between rental projects that have a high percentage of affordability versus rental projects that have no affordability. I mean, I do think one of the great outcomes of 213 was really refocused us on the fact that just building free market units doesn't do anything to solve our housing problems. So I think I could come back with a couple of proposals, some that might be a little out of the box, that maybe I could get to you in a privileged and confidential memo as to what those might look like, because I'd rather not necessarily discuss it yet publicly.
Okay, so you would think this is not quite a workshop item?
I think that it could be a workshop item. I think it probably should be. I think there's some background on your legal tools that you have available that I probably should give to you that is more attorney-client communication, I guess, for lack of anything else. And I'm not really, I guess, off the cuff ready to talk about, but I certainly could give you guys, and it's more by way of background so you understand what your legal tools are, as well as when you start talking about the policy.
Well, and you said code and all that and differentiation in code, so I understand. So is this, and I know we have full agendas, I understand, but is this something we don't put on the back burner too long?
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry, Hannah. Hi, Hannah.
We finished the comp plan. We have all the time in the world.
That's just it.
No, I mean, I do think, I do think that we're probably in a moment where we probably should push forward, because I think if nothing else, there's a drive in the private development community to avoid whatever comes next year on housing out of the state legislature, and might be more forward thinking in some ways after the input of particularly CAST and the communities up here. I mean, really put forward a lot of great ideas that I hopefully will become legislation. I could see us seeing a big push on trying to create free market housing to avoid any of those things happening.
Okay, so this is something we could look at or talk about.
Sure, yeah, I
Six-
always talk about this topic.
30 days, within 30 days?
We do, I know I've mentioned this and it will come eventually before you guys, our strategic housing plan update. You guys haven't seen anything about it. We had some public engagement and our consultants are actively getting us that draft and we're working on it. And so that will be updated. There's some really valuable information. They basically did a needs assessment update on that 2019 study and formulated in a way that I think all of you will find very interesting. So that is coming out and will lend itself to these conversations. And then, of course, West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition, we just had our board meeting today and we're talking about other creative ways. That's a regional effort, but there's partnership opportunities with each jurisdiction as well for creative ideas like buy downs, which is a development neutral idea, which I think has a lot of support community wise because it's getting away from building and turning something that's not affordable into affordable that already exists. So yes, this is something that Watkins, our senior planner, works on, and myself. So 30 days might be aggressive, but sure,
Let's do this before budget season.
For budget season. Okay.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Just
We
so
also-
I like 30 days better.
you like 30 days better? Okay, fair enough.
I believe I just heard that Carl.
You
was
guys
saying-
figure it out.
No, Steve just reminded me, budget season starts on June 1.
I was gonna say,
30
that's really
days
soon.
is-
Never mind.
Yeah.
And just in case you don't think, now that comp plan's over, we're just kind of sitting around.
Mhm.
Pepsi on the second floor, climate action plan, RFP is out,
Mhm.
that's moving forward. That's a very large project.
So
That's coming on the heels of.
so
the
now that you said that, here's my second cup.
Okay.
Huh? I have
Mike.
no problem with that.
I know.
Did I turn myself on?
I don't know.
Maybe I should shut up.
Probably.
Okay. The second thing I would like to talk about, and hopefully I can get some support from council as well, is upzoning.
Mm.
and second ADUs, use by right, as long as they're affordable. So I'm gonna leave that there. I hope
Okay.
we can maybe do this in the same lick, kind
Mhm.
of.
Mhm.
When it comes to housing,
Yeah,
see where we are.
Okay.
okay,
Thank you.
Great.
That's it. I'm done.
I am going to move on to Counselor Zelinski. Anything? Go ahead.
All I can say is, yes, you have my support. I think I would vote that.
Excellent. Counselor Godus.
Absolutely support what you said about ADUs, second ADUs and the other thing. I can't remember, but it sounded good.
Mhm.
We talked about downtown vitality and vibrancy maybe 3 years ago when A&B Bank came and took out that block of downtown. That's all the nicest way I can say it. Since then, we've talked about a downtown overlay and what that would look like. And since then, we've had Hotel Denver, soon to be Hotel something, take out some retail. We've had a potential 2 businesses on 8th Street that are in jeopardy of losing that vitality. This stuff just keeps happening, guys, while we don't do anything. And that was 3 years ago. And we've had
Hannah's coming up. She
Hold on,
wants to-
hold on. This is not a finger wagging, but we had a meeting, April 25th. We asked to do that meeting, but I think this needs to be on the next agenda. I think we need to get something in place now because I know in the next 2 weeks, there's going to be another real estate office that's going to take out a beloved local store. And I feel urgency to get it in place and not necessarily to get it right. Perfect, but just let's get it in place. Miss Hannah,
Yeah.
your response to
Thank you.
that.
Thank you, Jonathan. I know your urgency. We actually were looking because we held the public meetings. We had 2 of them. They were interesting. And staff is certainly planning on bringing you back that information because that's what council wanted after the last time. And in looking at your work session calendar, it was almost impossible to get on anything before July. So that is where it's currently slated for.
I would say, I would make a motion that we reprioritize some of our council agenda items and we take this up on the June 1st meeting.
And I think you may be seconding, so I'm going to.
I vehemently second.
Okay, great. So go ahead, let's just go ahead and put a hand up for those who would support moving up the overlay zoning dialogue to as soon as possible into a June meeting. It looks like that is. I believe so.
That's what I was going to
But
say.
we'll leave that to the city clerk and to the city manager as a request. So, okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Okay.
You're good. You're still on.
Southbridge, I think that presentation, we do have a new lead city engineer that we brought to speed. So I think honestly, like Jacobs potentially coming in. I think there's a representative from Jacobs that may have some experience with this project to give us that presentation. I think sooner rather than later, it's always good just to bring everybody up to speed. So, if Terry's not busy, she works for Jacobs now. So I think she would be great to give us that presentation. And then I've talked with Colin Laird. He's a trustee from the town of Carbondale about the Mountain West Regional Housing Alliance. And, I mentioned to him, he was talking about capacity issues with that group and taking it to the next level. And the problem is there's not dedicated professional staff. You are a dedicated professional staff, but you're not their dedicated professional staff. Of course, we love you, Hannah. Yeah. And so, I talked to him. Obviously, this was just spitballing with the fellow counselor. But we are looking to potentially hire a city manager or a city.
Housing director.
Thank you. And it occurs to me that this person would be spending probably a lot of their time talking about housing regionability. And, I think Colin suggested what if we could do a job split and it's not for saving money, right? We probably have the money to be able to hire this position. I think it's housing, one of our top priorities. But I think just as far as being able to have, instead of a full-time FTE, maybe a 3/4 FTE, but a quarter of it would be potentially paid from the 2 paying members of the Mountain West Regional Housing. It's just an idea. I bring it up for our contemplation. I'd like staff to possibly consider it, but tying it into like the larger housing conversation, I think would just potentially could be a win. And again, it's not about the money, it's more about the buy-in from everybody in the community. So that's something I'd like for maybe folks to consider and contemplate. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. It does look like Counselor Sachter has one more comment, maybe just some follow-up. So I'm going to put his mic on.
Thank you. I didn't have a comment, but now I thought of one. And now that Hannah's sitting there, can we, at some point also get an update on where we stand with 123 requirements and assessments and baseline? Not tonight, but I think just to know where we stand and if we stand at all. That's all. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to bring it back to me for just a second and say that it does seem that the housing dialogue is just so consistent. And we do have both a housing coalition or a housing commission and 2C commission, which has yet to be established who the members are. Let's be mindful that we have a filtering mechanism. As far as a position, I love the idea. And I think that Steve Boyd could maybe take that and run and come up with some recommendations that both work for the city, but also a collaborative approach, and see what else everyone is supportive of. I don't really have any other updates, but I thank you guys so much. And I'll just say thank you too, as everyone is patiently having me learn the system. So thank you guys. It's a lot. Counselor Goetz.
You're doing great.
That's what I was hoping for when I said that. I needed some accolades. Okay, thank you all so much. It does look like, I think we've got a report from our acting city manager. See if he's got some things to say this evening.
I'm good.
And our city attorney.
Steve actually wants to talk about the budget cycle.
I know you do.
All right, two things I will just kind of throw out there. One is I put a very short letter of support to Congressman Negus's office on it's a bill to start looking at AMI by a zip code basis instead of a county basis, which would be huge for us as we look at particularly tax credit projects. We run into some struggles there with the targets of 30 and 40 and 50% AMI. We frankly, our lowest paid workers in town exceed those numbers just by the very nature of them. The other one is the comment period is open on the Thompson Divide withdrawal right now. Again, historically, this council has been super supportive of that. I did get Wilderness Workshop did kind of ring my bell and say, hey, it is a new council. We'd sure appreciate it if they would just sort of reaffirm their position on Thompson Divide. If that's okay with you guys, I will probably bring something back for either a resolution or a letter of support and comments on Thompson Divide. This, you guys have been just huge supporters the city has kind of for our regional partners on that. So those are kind of my two things.
And actually, we've had 8 cycles of city councils that have come through, and all of them have been supportive of the opposition towards. Yeah. So that's significant.
It is absolutely significant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if there is support, we'll go ahead and sign this. Is there support?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, great. Thank you. If you're into it. And then that, I think, concludes the portion of that. So we will move into executive session. Will you remind me how we do that when we are going to adjourn immediately after?
So
Oh, the rafter letter. Okay.
If you look in your packet under the correspondence, there's a letter of support. And this one, the one that's in the packet is specific to my boy. And basically what it's asking, Okay, thank you. Basically what this letter is asking, it's to Shoshana Liu with CDOT and asking for CDOT to come to Garfield County and facilitate meetings kind of regionally for Garfield County between Carbondale and Parachute, and to work on transportation issues along the I-70 corridor, because as traffic gets worse, we are that choke point. And Jonathan and I both brought up in the RAFTA meetings that it would really be helpful if we could have a regional conversation to look at, how's South Canyon working for traffic? How is Glenwood Springs if traffic continues to grow on I-70, how do you get people through our town? And that's critical to us, but it's also critical as you go out I-70 and you see that the traffic is growing, and what's the plan there? I don't think we have a long-term plan, and hopefully we can talk about ways to reduce traffic along that stretch of highway. But this will allow CDOT to come in and request that they come in and work with us regionally to find out what those best solutions are. Garfield County is on board. And so actually, instead of Glenwood Springs signing a specific letter with our letterhead, it looks like what they'd like to do is have Garfield County write, it's the identical letter, and then they're just going to have all of the municipalities within the county sign. So I think they're asking you to, I sent you a Word.
Yeah,
copy
I actually
of that.
think the county issued a press release today with the letter in it.
Okay, so we
So-
just need the signature.
Yeah, and I actually think CDOT's already previously agreed to do that.
Awesome.
So it may
So
be that
that's
we just
great.
want to send a note to Director Liu and thank her for coming in and facilitating that.
Okay, as of today, RAFTA was still asking for signatures on.
Yeah, and
signatories
so
on that
we can
letter.
certainly sign it. I would just say that my understanding is that Director Liu is committed to doing that.
That's fantastic. And I think it's in line with the grant that they had for the mobility hubs in Junction and.
Mhm.
Lakeville.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yeah, Counselor Gotis.
I think RAFTA, or I'm sorry, excuse me, I think CDOT did want us to sign that letter so that they could have that in the file.
Mhm.
So I
Okay.
don't want it to not go sent.
Okay.
Right.
It's just an
no,
important check off the
absolutely.
box.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that
First,
CDOT
we
had
have to
agreed to
say
do
where-
it, which is fantastic.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so will you give us, Carl, will you give us a
Yeah,
little
I-
guidance on this?
Yeah, I'll just coach you guys through this. So we have an executive session on next pursuant to 24-6-4014E regarding negotiations on a potential property acquisition. If I could get the mayor pro tem to read the motion, which is the second red box down.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-4014E for a conference with the city manager and city attorney for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subjects to negotiations, developing strategies for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators, more specifically regarding property acquisition adjacent to the Roaring Fork River.
Counselor Zelinski.
I second the motion.
And do we need to,
Hang on, Madam Mayor, if I may add, that
Mhm.
after the executive session, the meeting is adjourned.
thank
Tonight's
you.
meetings is adjourned.
That's perfect.
automatic.
Thank you. And are we ready to go in?
Motion.
Okay.
Carry the vote.
As soon as you vote.
Well, let's vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries unanimously. It's May 18th, 2023.
Let's hang on until we get make sure we're off.
Yep. Great. The tech room. Okay,
Hang on.
we are adjourned. Yep.
Well, we're going to turn out.